There is a place on Earth where the sea seems to belong to no world as we know it. There, the water lacks the tranquil blue of coastlines and the warm shimmer of tropical oceans. It is dark, heavy, almost black, surrounded by ice, wind, and a solitude that can crush the mind of any person. At that far corner of the planet, where Antarctica seems to close off the map like a white wall, some sailors began to speak of something unlike anything they had ever seen. They didn't claim to have seen a whale, a giant squid, or a swift shadow beneath the surface. They spoke of a white, enormous, silent form, moving underwater with an eerie slowness. The most unsettling thing wasn't just its size. It was its shape. They said it resembled a human. Not human in the sense of a statue distorted by the imagination, but human in its structure. A head, an upper body resembling shoulders, long limbs, and a presence that seemed too familiar to be in the most inhuman place on Earth. And that's the question that unlocks this whole mystery. What would you do if, looking from the deck of a ship in the Southern Ocean, you saw something the size of a vessel, but shaped like a person? Before we give in to fear, we must state the first truth clearly. There is no verified scientific proof of the Ningen. There is no body, no DNA sample, no photograph accepted by specialists, no formal record of a giant, human-shaped marine species. Therefore, this is not a case that can be presented as a confirmed creature. It is a modern legend, a story that lives on in internet tales, alleged testimonies, and humanity's fascination with the unknown. But the fact that it is unproven does not mean it is not interesting. On the contrary, what makes the Ningen powerful is that it combines three very real elements: an extreme ocean that we barely understand, testimonies that are difficult to verify, and a deep-seated fear that we all recognize. Seeing something human where nothing human should exist. In short, the Ningen is not frightening because it is completely unknown. It is frightening because it seems too familiar. To understand why this story has survived for so many years, we must first look at the setting where it supposedly takes place. The Southern Ocean is no ordinary sea. It is a vast expanse of icy water surrounding Antarctica, a region where ships can spend days without seeing another vessel, hearing nothing but the wind, the engine, and the waves crashing against the hull. There are no nearby ports, no cities illuminating the horizon, no friendly shoreline awaiting at the end of the journey. There is only an immense expanse of frigid water, floating ice, sudden storms, and a constant feeling of sailing along the very edge of the world. In such a place, any white shape that appears among the waves can look like ice. Any shadow underwater can look like an animal, and any unexpected movement can become a perilous question. Is that floating, or is it swimming? The reality of the Southern Ocean lends credence to the legend, because it is a remote, harsh environment, little observed by humans. Its waters encircle Antarctica, connect vast ocean masses, and are influenced by powerful currents. It is also a cold, deep, and difficult region to study over long periods. This isolation fuels the imagination, but it also demands caution. Just because a place is extreme doesn't automatically mean it harbors a giant humanoid creature. A mysterious ocean may conceal unknown species, but it doesn't turn any strange silhouette into proof. This distinction is important. The setting can explain why the story is believable, but it doesn't prove the creature exists. Simply put, the place is real, the danger is real, and the difficulty of observing it is real. But a place that is difficult to explore doesn't prove a legend. It merely provides the perfect breeding ground for it. The most unsettling tales from the Ningen often begin quite simply. A sailor is on watch during a polar night, or on a gray morning where the light seems weak. He looks toward the water and notices a large, low, white patch, almost touching the surface. At first, there's no reason to be alarmed. In those waters, seeing ice is not unusual. There are fragments floating everywhere, shapes broken by the sea, blocks that slowly rotate and seem to change size depending on the distance and the light. The sailor looks away, looks again, and then something doesn't add up. The shape seems to have moved in a way that doesn't correspond to ice. It doesn't seem to be carried by the current. It seems to be moving with a purpose. And here arises the most powerful detail of the mystery: the sense of intention. It's not just that the thing is white. It's not just that it's large. It's that it seems to decide where it's going. To a human mind, that difference changes everything. A rock doesn't decide. A block of ice doesn't choose. But a creature does. However, the most reasonable explanation also begins at that very point. In polar seas, ice can take on deceptive shapes, move with currents unseen from the surface, swirl with the waves, and appear alive even when the ship is in motion. Add to that the fatigue of a long watch, the dim light, the extreme cold, and the tension of being in a dangerous area, and human perception can fill in the gaps with familiar forms. Our brains don't observe like a perfect camera. They interpret. They look for patterns. They look for bodies. They look for faces. And when they find a white figure in an environment where everything is constantly shifting, they can transform a block of ice into a presence. This doesn't mean the witnesses lied. It means that even an experienced person can misinterpret something under extreme conditions. In short, perhaps the Ningen began as something only partially seen, in the worst possible place, at the worst possible time, by eyes trying too quickly to understand an ambiguous shape. If you enjoy mysteries that blend legend, science, and the most extreme places on the planet, subscribe now, leave a like, and stay until the end, because the most unsettling thing about Ningen isn't just what some sailors thought they saw, but why our own brain can turn ice into a human figure. But the story becomes much more disturbing when the accounts stop talking about a simple white stain and begin to describe arms, hands, and a face peering out from under the water. Before we continue, write in the comments what would scare you more. The most famous description of the Ningen doesn't remain a mere shadow. According to legend, those who claim to have seen it speak of a white, enormous figure, 20 or even 30 meters tall, with an upper body resembling a head and shoulders. Some accounts mention long arms moving underwater as if a giant person were swimming slowly. Others speak of legs disappearing into the darkness. Still others completely change the image and describe a lower body more like a tail, as if the creature were a monstrous Antarctic version of a mermaid. These differences are important because they show how a legend works when it lacks a verifiable basis. If a real species were clearly observed many times, we would expect the descriptions to match more precisely. But in the case of the Ningen, the central idea remains, and the details change. White, enormous, humanoid. That's enough for the imagination to fill in the rest. And each new version can add a detail darker than the last. One person sees a long shape and speaks of a body. Another hears that story and remembers something resembling an arm. A third adds a hand. Gradually, the creature becomes more defined, not necessarily because someone has seen it better, but because the story has had more time to develop. This doesn't destroy the mystery, it transforms it. It shows us that the Ningen doesn't just belong to the ocean. It also belongs to the way human beings narrate what frightens them. Simply put, when a legend is passed down many times, it can become clearer in the imagination even if it remains just as vague in reality. Among all the details associated with the Ningen, there is one that produces a particular unease. The hand. It's not the size. It's not the whiteness. It's not even the possibility of a face. It's the idea of a giant hand opening and closing underwater. A claw would seem animalistic. A tentacle would seem marine. A fin would make us think of a whale. But a hand changes the viewer's reaction because it belongs to our own body. We all know what a hand looks like floating in the water. We all know how fingers spread when a person tries to stay steady underwater. That's why, when a story says that something gigantic had a hand, the fear becomes personal. We are no longer just imagining an unknown creature, but a distorted version of ourselves. That is the psychological power of the Ningen. It lives in an intermediate zone between the animal and the human. It is not human enough to reassure us, but neither is it animal enough to be easily categorized. This mixture triggers a deep unease, similar to the feeling produced by figures that are too realistic but slightly inaccurate. The brain recognizes a familiar shape, but at the same time detects that something is amiss. And when something familiar appears distorted in a hostile environment, the mind interprets it as a threat. That's why a hand can be more unsettling than a mouth full of teeth. The teeth belong to the monster, The hand belongs to us. Simply put, the Ningen is frightening because it seems like an impossible copy of a human being, a figure that takes our form to a place where our form shouldn't survive even a minute. The darkest point of the legend comes when some accounts speak of a face. Not a clearly visible face, not a face photographed and analyzed, but an impression. Frontal eyes beneath the surface, a line where the mouth should be, a pale head slowly rising before disappearing again into the black water. In a story of sea monsters, a face changes everything. A whale can look with a sideways eye. A fish can open its mouth. A squid can display strange intelligence. But a human face under the ice suggests something more difficult to explain. It forces us to feel that we are not only observing a creature, but that perhaps that creature is also observing us. And that feeling is one of the most powerful of human fears, the idea of being watched from an invisible place. But here comes the most important explanation. The human brain is trained to detect faces with enormous speed, even when they don't exist. We see faces in shadows, walls, trees, clouds, mountains, and patches of light. This phenomenon is known as pareidolia. It is not a weakness or madness. It is a survival tool. For thousands of years, recognizing a face quickly could mean identifying another human being, detecting a threat, or reading an emotion before it was too late. The problem is that this same system can fail. In the Southern Ocean, with moving water, white ice, low light, cold, fatigue, and fear, an ambiguous shape can mentally become a face. And when someone believes they've seen eyes, the experience becomes almost impossible to forget. Simply put, perhaps no one deliberately invented the face of the Ningen. Perhaps the mind constructed it to make sense of a shape that, on its own, was too confusing to accept. But if it could all have been ice, shadow, tiredness, or imagination, then one question remains open. Why did the same legend return again and again for so many years? Like this post if you believe the oceans still hold real secrets, and comment if you think the Ningen was born from a misperception, or from something we haven't yet identified. To follow the trail of the Ningen, one must leave the ship and enter another ocean: the internet. Unlike ancient sea legends that traveled from port to port, this story grew in forums, anonymous posts, translations, screenshots, and second- or third-hand accounts. According to the most repeated version, the Ningen began circulating widely in Japanese online spaces during the 2000s, where users shared strange stories about supposed workers or crew members who had seen something in Antarctic waters. This origin alone compels us to be cautious. We are not dealing with an official report, a scientific document, or an expedition that has published verifiable results. We are dealing with a chain of accounts where we often don't know who saw what, when it happened, at what coordinates, under what conditions, or with what evidence. But here we find the detail that transformed the rumor into a myth: the name. Ningen means human or human being. It wasn't called a beast, demon, dragon, or leviathan. It was given a simple, direct, and profoundly unsettling word. By calling it human, the story no longer needs to show much. The name does half the work. It tells the viewer what to imagine before seeing any image. And once that image enters the mind, it's hard to get rid of. Something enormous underwater would be unsettling. Something enormous underwater in human form becomes unforgettable. Simply put, the name doesn't just describe a creature. It creates a mental image. The Ningen didn't become famous because it had solid evidence, but because it had a visual idea too powerful to ignore. Along with the stories, images began to circulate. Blurry photographs, white patches on gray water, purported satellite captures, silhouettes near the ice, shapes too unclear to confirm anything and too suggestive to be immediately dismissed by the popular imagination. That's the perfect breeding ground for a visual legend. If an image were perfectly clear, it could be analyzed. If it were completely useless, no one would talk about it. But when an image is right in the middle, when it shows something but not enough, the viewer's mind engages. It starts filling in edges, turns patches into limbs. It interprets shadows as heads. It looks for symmetry. It looks for an explanation. And when it already knows the story of the Ningen, it specifically looks for a human form. The problem is that none of these images, on its own, can support an extraordinary claim. For a photograph or video to serve as serious evidence, it would need verifiable context. Original file, date, location, chain of provenance, independent analysis, adequate resolution, and comparison with known objects. Without that, a white shape in the sea could be many things: ice, foam, a reflection, a wave, a known animal, a compression error, or manipulation. The emotion an image evokes doesn't make it proof. Often, the Ningen images work better as atmosphere than as evidence. They give us just enough to imagine, but not enough to reach a conclusion. Simply put, a blurry photo can start a conversation, fuel a legend, and provoke fear, but it can't confirm the existence of an unknown creature. Even so, those who believe in the Ningen present an argument that shouldn't be immediately ridiculed. The ocean is immense, deep, and still largely unexplored. Science continues to discover new species. For a long time, real animals were considered exaggerations or legends until evidence was found. The giant squid, for example, belonged for centuries to the realm of sea monsters before being fully accepted by modern science. Moreover, the ocean floor remains one of the least observed environments on the planet. So, the believer's question seems reasonable. If there are entire areas of the sea that we barely see, why would it be impossible for something large and strange to live there? The answer requires balance. It's true that the ocean can hold surprises. It's true that there are species yet to be discovered. It's true that depth, darkness, and pressure make exploration extremely difficult. But a general possibility doesn't prove a specific case. The existence of unknown creatures doesn't mean that a humanoid creature 20 or 30 meters long exists. And there's an important difference between a deep-sea species and a gigantic figure that, according to legend, appears near the surface, close to ships and ice, leaving no clear photographs, remains, biological traces, or verifiable observations. Science doesn't dismiss something for lack of imagination. It demands proof because without proof, any story could seem plausible. In short, the ocean does hold real secrets, but that doesn't automatically turn every viral mystery into an unknown species. The Ningen remains right on that borderline, improbable enough to be suspicious, but evocative enough to keep us asking questions. Let's return to the initial image. A ship in Antarctic waters, floating ice, gray light, cold wind, and a white shape moving beneath the surface. If we put all the pieces together, the most likely explanation doesn't require an impossible creature. It requires a perfect combination of real factors: ice with strange shapes, currents imperceptible from the deck, waves that alter the apparent position of objects, familiar animals seen in adverse conditions, accumulated fatigue, fear, silence, and then the internet repeating a story until it becomes a recognizable form. In that sense, the mystery doesn't disappear, but rather shifts location. It's no longer solely in the sea. It's also in the human mind, because our senses don't register the world neutrally. They interpret it. They fill in incomplete information. They look for familiar patterns. When a white shape moves among ice and shadows, the brain doesn't always wait for all the facts. It decides quickly, and if that decision occurs in a remote place under emotional pressure, the memory can be forever etched. This doesn't mean all the accounts are intentionally false. Some people may have seen something real. What may have gone wrong was their interpretation of that something. Perhaps it was ice. Perhaps it was foam. Perhaps it was a known animal partially hidden. Perhaps it was a mixture of several elements at the same moment. The point isn't to ridicule those who claim to have seen something. The point is to understand that a sincere experience doesn't always equate to a correct conclusion. Perhaps the Ningen isn't an unknown species at all, but rather the result of an ambiguous form that our brains interpreted as human because we needed to make sense of it. So, if there's no solid evidence, if the images prove nothing, and if reasonable natural explanations exist, why doesn't the legend of the Ningen die? The answer lies in the kind of fear it represents. The Ningen isn't just an internet creation. It's a figure that embodies a much older anxiety. The idea that there are still parts of the world where humankind doesn't rule, doesn't observe, and doesn't understand. The Southern Ocean functions in this story as more than just a setting. It's a boundary. There, the comfort of the map ends. There, the weather can turn against us. There, the water conceals depths that most of us will never see. And there, precisely there, the legend places a human-like figure, as if the planet were returning to us a distorted version of ourselves from the coldest and quietest place. That's why the Ningen survives. Not because it has better evidence than other mysteries, but because its image is perfect, an impossible human being beneath an impossible ocean. Science can honestly answer that there is no verifiable evidence, and that answer is necessary. But the human imagination doesn't live on evidence alone. It also thrives on symbols, and the Ningen symbolizes something we still feel every time we look at the sea, that the visible surface of the world may be just a lid, and beneath it may lie realities we don't yet understand. Simply put, the legend doesn't survive because of what it proves. It survives because of what it makes us feel. That in places we can't look, we might still find something looking back at us. Perhaps the most honest conclusion isn't to say, the Ningen exists, nor to say, it was all made up. The most responsible response lies somewhere between fascination and caution. To this day, the Ningen remains a modern legend without verified scientific evidence. The most reasonable explanation points to errors in perception: Antarctic ice, familiar animals seen under harsh conditions, pareidolia, stories altered over time, and amplification on the internet. But that doesn't completely diminish the story's power, because the real setting remains breathtaking. An immense, cold, deep, dangerous ocean, still incompletely known to most of us. That combination allows the legend to retain its strength even when the evidence doesn't support it. Imagine the scene one last time. Black water moving slowly, ice floating silently, a ship sailing away under a gray sky, and beneath the surface, a white shape that may just be a block of ice rotating with the current, or it may appear, for a second, to be something with a head, arms, and a face. Perhaps therein lies the true mystery. Not in a giant creature, but in that instant when the ocean ceases to resemble water and becomes a dark mirror. Simply put, the Ningen is probably not a real creature, but it is one of the most effective modern legends because it taps into a real fear, the immensity of the ocean and our inability to see it all. And as long as there are places beyond the reach of the human eye, stories like this will continue to return from the darkness. Now it's your turn. When you imagine that white shape beneath the Antarctic waters, do you see only ice, shadows, and a weary mind trying to make sense of it? Or do you think the ocean might still be hiding something we're not ready to name? Write your answer in the comments. And if you want more mysteries explained with science, history, and a cinematic feel, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next video.